Hey everyone, it's Barbara Ann. Welcome back to my channel, Straight Out of Context. Copyright disclaimer. Under the Copyright Act of 1976, I am within my full legal right to share these following clips via video and audio. The following creators allow reshare, redistribution, and download of their content, and as always, I credit in the description box down below. Fair use, public domain, TikTok third-party license, and TikTok Live automatic third-party license for the use of commentary, reaction, teaching, news reporting, research, comment, and criticism. I am legally within my basic human, civil, and constitutional right to share under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, to share my expressions, views, thoughts, opinions, feelings, and critiques. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees my freedom of religion, freedom to exercise of, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, free assembly, and the right to petition the government and air my grievances. The First Amendment does not cover lies that amount to defamation, slander, libel, harassment, stalking, cyberstalking, bullying, cyberbullying, threats, or any other verbal crimes.
How are you? You ready?
Yeah, are you ready to go here? Oh, okay. Hi.
Good to see you.
Nate, such a pleasure.
Have a seat.
Long time coming, huh?
It has been. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
So I want to start with Chad.
Okay.
You told me years ago.
Today is my birthday.
Today's your birthday.
How old do you think that I am?
52.
Oh, how did you know?
I do my research.
You must know a lot.
Yes.
For those of you who don't remember, Nate Eaton is the one who found Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell in a resort in Hawaii years ago. If you don't remember the infamous exclusive with his microphone in her face saying, "Lori, where are the kids? Where are the kids?" You can tell that they were completely caught out because they thought they were very hidden. Too bad a family member let the authorities and Nate Eaton know exactly where they were and that they had gotten married. But remember, everybody was looking for Tylee and JJ.
Girls are like, are you turning 25 in my pod? And I was like, no, I'm turning 25 plus 25 plus 2.
There you go. So
Do
you
the
told,
math.
you told me years ago Chad was the best man you've ever met.
Chad is a very kind person, yes.
Is that still true?
Yes.
So besides his spirituality, what else attracts you to Chad?
He's a wonderful person. Everyone who knows him knows that. You've never met him, right?
I haven't met him other than when we were in Hawaii.
I'm saying you never met him, talked to him, interacted with him, or...
No,
yeah.
no. How often are you able to talk with him?
So we aren't really speaking.
By your own choice or just because it's not allowed from like prison to prison?
Yeah, like the way that the mail works here is very difficult.
I see.
So we're only allowed to get postcards. Like you can't send a letter to the jail itself, and so there's difficulties within that.
But you still love him.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you've said you'll be exonerated and he will too.
Absolutely, we will.
Will that be before he's executed?
Yes, Nate, before he's executed.
I know people have differing opinions and thoughts and feelings on whether or not white privilege exists. And I'm not going to get into that, but there is a huge discrepancy between inmates. Chad Daybell received the death penalty for the murder of his wife, Tammy Daybell, and the murders of Tylee and JJ. Whereas Lori Vallow Daybell herself did not receive the death penalty in the state of Idaho. In March of 2023, a judge ruled that she was not eligible for the same exact two murders of Tylee and JJ. I have my own opinions about felony homicide in any state. Felony homicide is not the same thing as imminent and immediate danger to which you have the right to self-defense. Once we start being lenient on anybody who commits felony homicide, well, I think there's a problem. And no, I do not buy Lori's entire story and her constantly changing narratives about who, where, when, why, and how. And sorry, I am not sorry, but her being a white woman shouldn't afford her any privilege. It's bad enough that certain people think that they are entitled enough to just do these kinds of felony crimes and get away with it, because a lot of the times they do for years. Same state, same two murders of the same two children, yet Chad receives the death penalty and Lori does not. And there is no way that they can raise any kind of insanity or self-defense defense. Believing that God speaks to you directly and that you are special and chosen doesn't mean that you fit the legal standard and definition of insane. Because she certainly, so did Chad, know the difference between right and wrong, and they still chose wrong. But you can always tell when somebody has something else going on as far as mental illness, like a cluster B personality disorder, because, well, just wait and watch, because Lori is the perfect example of it. But we also seen a perfect example in Gypsy Rose Blanchard, Casey Anthony, Amber Heard.
You're well aware, I know that you are LDS as well as I am, right? And you're well aware that the 3 Nephites in 3 Nephi 28 were given the death penalty 7 times. They were arrested after Jesus personally translated them, okay? They were arrested, convicted, and given the death penalty 7 times.
Here's a fun fact. The LDS Church has been consistently losing followers in the past decade, but they also have a disproportionate amount of felony, very heinous crimes, including homicide, wire fraud, check fraud, bank fraud, unlawful use of a debit card, identity theft, felony level drug charges, etc., compared to other religions. But the fact that Lori is trying to compare her and Chad's case to Jesus, like how smug and conceited do you have to be in your own head? Whatever her crazy belief system is, and however much she wants to use the Bible or scripture to back up her beliefs, it doesn't make what she did right or okay.
And where are they today?
I don't know.
They're still wandering the earth.
Yeah.
They didn't get executed. They didn't get the death penalty. And there's 220 people in this country who have been on death row and have been exonerated and gone home.
Do you think it'll be soon then?
I think it'll be in the Lord's time. I know that it will be in the Lord's time. And when you say the word soon, if you've ever watched In The Chosen or dealt with Jesus at all, you know that soon is a relative term because 1,000 years are a day to him.
There she goes, trying to relate with Nate Eaton with, oh, well, you're in the church, right? And then goes on to not only try to educate, but belittle his intellect as far as his faith goes, as if she is morally superior when it comes to faith. The assumption and presumption that you are smarter intellectually and spiritually than somebody else is astonishing, because she doesn't know anything about what he knows and does not know in regards to his faith. It's condescending, it's pompous, it's conceited, it's rude, and it's not her business anybody else's relationship with God or Jesus Christ.
Does it bother you, though, that in Chad's trial, he blamed it on you and Alex?
So now that I know the judicial system, and now that I have been my own attorney and how things work, and I've said this before in an interview, it's so different what goes on behind the scenes in a high-profile case. Okay, there's strategies going on, there's defenses going on, there's all these things going on that you wish, like, why can't we just go in and tell our side of the story? The attorneys are like, you can't do that. We have to come up with a defense.
Yes, defendants are supposed to come up with a defense. It's preferred, anyway, to have some kind of defense to argue. In the United States legal system, defendants are not required to prove their innocence. Instead, the prosecution bears the burden of proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. However, defendants have the right to present a defense, meaning they can challenge the prosecution's evidence, present their own evidence, and argue their case to the court. This right is crucial for ensuring a fair trial and preventing wrongful convictions. The presumption of innocence. Burden of proof. The presumption of innocence is a fundamental principle in the U.S. legal system that a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Now, this is where everybody gets this wrong. This is not explicitly stated anywhere in the U.S. Constitution. It is a fundamental principle in the legal system, of which judges, jurors, attorneys, and even district or prosecuting attorneys need to adhere to ensure a plaintiff or defendant's constitutional rights are upheld. That in and of itself is not a law. It is not explicitly stated anywhere in the U.S. Constitution or any amendment. Every person has the right to due process. Society and the court of public opinion does not have to presume innocence for anybody. But those within the legal system, yes, they do. It is a fundamental principle of which they should morally and ethically abide by to ensure everybody's due process rights. Again, that's jurors, judges, attorneys, district or prosecuting attorneys, and anybody else who may work within the legal or court systems. And we all know in the court of law, it's not so much as proving somebody is guilty, especially not today with modern science, medicine, and technology. The U.S. legal system gets it wrong all the time. An estimated 12.8% of people that are incarcerated in the U.S. are actually innocent of the crime they were convicted on. There's over 346,000 unsolved homicides in the United States just in the last 70 years. That is over 250,000 people who have committed homicide walking freely. Around 97% of all ID theft, bank fraud, wire fraud, check fraud, unlawful use of a credit or debit card ever gets prosecuted or sees a courtroom. And on average, a person typically gets away with $6,000 to $10,000. However, everybody has the right to a defense, and that doesn't change the fundamental truth if somebody is actually innocent or actually guilty. Within the legal system, they must presume that everybody is innocent and treat it as such, even if they truly are not. You have the right to call witnesses. You have the right to testify on your own behalf. You have the right to cross-examine witnesses. You need a defense to challenge the prosecution's case. There's only two reasons why somebody wouldn't want to come up with a defense: insufficient evidence, or they have pleaded the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. But that doesn't apply to Lori because many people died at the hands of a homicide across multiple states because of her, including 2 of her children.
And we have to do this, and we have to do this, and like, why do we just go, why isn't it, you thought, like, if you've never been in the judicial system, which I hadn't before, you thought they get to tell their side of the story, what they think happened, you get to go in and tell your side of the story of what happened, and then the jury gets to decide. And that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. And it's so sad and disappointing that that's...
So you think Chad Bain had to come up with a defense just to have one in court? You don't think he really believed or blamed all of this on you and Alex?
Absolutely. And I know that for a fact because John Pryor came and told me that prior to trial.
He did. He said, this is going to be our defense.
He said, I'm going to blame you, and Chad doesn't want me to, and he wants you to know that.
So explain to me why and how that has anything to do with her raising a defense for herself. If she truly didn't do it and had no hand in any of this whatsoever. If she truly was that innocent and had no part to play in any of this, her innocence should have been very easily proven. Instead, she's worried about who is trying to set up Chad Daybell instead of talking about the truth, which is supposedly, according to her and from her perspective, that she and Chad had nothing to do with this. Simply saying those words don't mean it's a setup. And that certainly doesn't prove a conspiracy, because to prove a conspiracy or a frame job, you have to prove that people conspired before any of these homicides, that they had just cause to cause said homicides to frame somebody or to conspire to frame somebody. Nobody would have any reason, because they didn't know who Chad Daybell or Lori were. Yeah, he's a Doomsday author, but it's not like he was mainstream or anything like that. Nobody knew about his books until after the mainstream media started publishing about the homicides and the children missing.
And this is the kind of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that nobody sees, that nobody knows what's going on. There's so much stuff going on that you wouldn't even believe all the things that go on. The experts that are being paid, the things that are going on. We got this expert, we paid him $1 million to say the opposite of whatever your expert's going to say. Like, what do you mean they paid him? The state paid an expert $1 million retainer to say whatever the opposite of what our state, what our
Arizona or Idaho?
In Idaho was what our witness is going to say. And the attorneys told me this, and I'm like, are you kidding? Like,
You didn't have any witness.
As I went over, that is her due process right to call any witnesses she wants and to cross-examine any witnesses she wants. That is how it goes. And yes, both sides have the right to pay experts to testify. But that's also why the other side has the right to prove their innocence in a court of law, or to raise reasonable doubt in the court of law, to try and prove somebody's guilt in the court of law. The opposite side has the right to cross-examine and to bring on new witnesses to refute what that witness or what that expert said. If Lori was innocent, she wouldn't have had any hard time doing just that. She would have also testified in her own defense, taken a polygraph test, willingly handed over all of her devices, electronics, everything, and said, here, look, I'm innocent. Please do anything you can to exonerate me. She would have cooperated with authorities across multiple states, not ran and hid and then lie after she's caught.
We did. Yeah, in the build-up, we did.
But then
we
you
absolutely
didn't
did.
call him.
Well, there's reasons for that. That there's strategies involved. There's things going on, and you have no control when you have attorneys. They're doing it how they want to.
And that's
do
why
it.
you wanted to be your own attorney.
There's several reasons. The number one reason was because they wanted me to sit here for 5 years while they got to know the case, and I wanted a speedy trial.
Can we go back to Hawaii? When I first met you and Chad.
And we didn't meet. You just put a microphone in my face.
Okay, when I
now we've met.
We have met. You're right. Why didn't you just tell me where the kids were?
Because I was not ready to talk about it at all at that point.
No, it's because she was absolutely dumbfounded that she had been found. Talk about deer in headlights. She was caught red-handed and she knew it. You could tell by her face.
I was just not ready. It was very traumatic and I was not ready for any of that.
Are you ready to talk now?
I have talked about it already, yeah. I feel like a lot of things have happened in these last 5.5 years to give me strength through that tragedy that happened with my children. And I've been a lot more open in being able to talk about it now. And through therapy also, like some post-traumatic stress therapy because it's traumatic. And
Yeah, that's so funny that that's everybody's go-to. Sherry Papini, Casey Anthony, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, even Amber Heard all tried to say that they're victims and that they were traumatized and abused. Sherry Papini cannot tell a lie straight to save her life. Casey Anthony looks dead-faced. Gypsy's own eye is trying to get the hell away from her mouth. Amber Heard's facial expressions don't even buy the bullshit that comes out of hers. And Lori is a special type of sociopathic narcissist. She's over here talking you till you get so drained and worn down that you just give up. She talks in the word salad circles. Literally, from one topic to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, to keep distracting what you are trying to get out of her. But what she's not doing when she's refusing to answer questions, tell the truth, or omitting the truth, the one thing she's not doing is telling the truth. And you can guess that by elimination and deduction by all the things she is saying. That's how you know when somebody is guilty. They're so effing smart. They think they're the smartest person in the room, but they're truly not because they tell on themselves.
Living in here with some beautiful, intelligent, smart women. And had I never come to Arizona, and I know God put me here for a purpose because I didn't think Arizona was going to come and get me. In fact, I think you and I had a talk about that because there was an article that came out in Idaho saying that Arizona was not going to come and extradite me until all my appeals were finished. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. And I think, and then my appeals...
Like the next day that you were gone.
Yeah, the next day they came and got me. And my appeals attorney was supposed to come, he had an appointment that day when they came to get me to drive down from Boise to Pocatello for us to have a meeting. And they didn't even tell him I was gone. Like, I was just gone that day. They came the next day. So I didn't think they were coming.
Ooh, little Miss Know-It-All. You know, the person that Jesus Christ and God himself speaks to doesn't know everything. But I thought Lori Vallow Daybell was privy to all of the things that the general public does not know. Is this her admitting that she's just a peasant like the rest of us? That God and Jesus Christ himself don't really speak to her because she's not one of the special 144,000 that is going to survive the apocalypse? So she had absolutely no idea they were coming to get her. Lori actually thought that she was going to get away with all these multiple homicides across different states, that she was going to get married for a fifth time, that she was going to hide and live happily ever after off of millions of dollars in life insurance. You really think you're smarter than the U.S. legal system and the FBI? Because one thing is for sure, once you done did that, you done pissed off Jesus Christ and God himself. Maybe that's why he's really not talking to Lori anymore. Even God said, this one's so evil, I'm done. I give up on her.
You mentioned a tragedy, and you said that this has all been a family tragedy.
Yes.
And it has been a huge tragedy.
Absolutely.
All of this.
Absolutely.
4 juries have said you and Chad and Alex caused the tragedy.
Yeah, that's the judicial system.
But the judicial system did nothing but bring justice. They didn't cause the homicides. This is an expert at projecting and deflecting and negating.
But how do you argue with that if all of this evidence came out that showed, that you, Chad...
The only evidence that ever came out is evidence state wanted to put forth.
Then that begs the question, Lori, why didn't you and Chad bring forth the evidence that you had that exonerated you both? Because you had none. All of the evidence that the states brought forth in both of your trials proved your guilt.
They manipulate the evidence to make it look however they want. And guess who helps them? The media helps them. Because from day one, when someone called you, day one, whether it was Detective Hope or Detective Hermosillo, I'm not sure, called you and said, hey, Nate Eaton, this is going to be the biggest story of your life. And they got that information from Heather Daybell. And Heather Daybell and Detective Hoper are connected, right, because their kids got married. And they called and she said, oh, I have a story for you. These people killed their spouses so they could get married, which was totally a rumor, totally untrue. And then you ran with it. And you got famous from it. And everybody knows what happened from that, right? So
yeah, she got pissed off because somebody outfoxed her at her own game. That family heard and knew what was happening, and that he found exactly where she was at. They were found at their resort in Hawaii, newly and happily married, after conveniently having both of their wife and their husband murdered. And Nate Eaton was just the one that happened to be there with the microphone saying, "Where are the kids?" That was her oh fuck moment. Not her oh shit moment. Oh fuck. What are we going to do? Now the mainstream media knows where we are at. Now the whole world knows that the kids are missing. Oh, but guess what? The kids were, exactly where Chad and Lori left them, buried in a backyard. That's why she couldn't produce them when a judge said that she had to produce the children. She knew she couldn't.
That's the way it goes. So the media put out their narrative. They kept on with it. The state went along with it. The state leaked stuff to the media to say what they wanted.
What's false about
Oh my gosh, everything.
Your children were found dead in Chad's backyard. That's not wrong. Tylee was chopped up and burned. That's not wrong.
No, that's all mixed up. That wasn't.
I saw photos of JJ wrapped in plastic and duct tape. That wasn't wrong.
You can see the wheels in her mind trying to come up with what to say. Yeah, the evidence was shown to a jury, including their autopsies. JJ and Tylee did not die from accidental causes. They were intentional. They were homicidal. It is not normal for two healthy, physically healthy children to come up missing and then found deceased, buried in somebody's backyard, especially directly after they had went on a family vacation to a national park. It's also very unusual that Lori's brother ends up deceased, as well as Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell, and Lori's fourth husband, Charles Vallow. And directly after her fourth husband was killed, Lori had the audacity to not only take his phone and drive around with it, she went to a Burger King and got food for herself. Yeah.
Okay, I understand what you're saying of those facts. Those facts in and of themselves are wrapped around a whole lot of untruth.
About how they ended up there.
Correct.
So if Tylee killed JJ and then felt bad and committed suicide, how did she die first?
She didn't.
See, now she's just pulling things right out of her ass to try to explain away this person's questions. But yet she doesn't offer the concrete truth. She's saying everything but the truth. So now she is admitting that Tylee didn't die first, which means that she knew something happened, that they had died. Because one thing is for sure, if she had no part to play with any of this whatsoever, how did two children unalive each other and then bury themselves after becoming deceased? So she's not saying too much because either which way, she, her brother, or Chad Daybell are implicated. Again, by elimination and deduction, this is not how an innocent person would react or speak, especially in an interview.
She didn't?
That's not part of their whole fake narrative. That's
Who burned her and chopped her up?
That's part of everything that they were doing. So I don't really want to get into all of those details with you because you obviously are very set in your mind. I'm not here to change people's minds.
I want you to change my mind. I'd love to hear any evidence or facts you have that might make me think, you know what, they have it wrong, but I haven't heard anything otherwise.
That's because you've been pushing this narrative for 5.5 years. You're not telling me that your mind is not set on what it is already?
Minds can change.
They could change
Right.
if they're open to change.
Right.
Okay, so miracles are on the way. And you remember I asked you to watch a movie?
Yes, Evan Almighty.
I did. And did you watch that movie?
I did.
And did you identify yourself with the reporter in that movie?
I don't know if I identified myself with, did you identify him with me?
Yes, absolutely.
So what does that mean?
Okay, so when did the reporter change his mind?
Remind me.
When he was floating in the flood on the ark. Okay, not until God showed the miracle did his mind change.
Okay, Lori, here, we're going to have to break it to you. You are not closer to God or Jesus Christ than anybody else that is faithful or devout. And you are not the performer of miracles. If Lori Vallow Daybell was the one who had the ear of God, was the closest to him, walked beside Jesus Christ, do you think that her little ass would be sitting in a prison anywhere in Arizona or Idaho? But she's going to sit here and recite parts of the Bible to try to relate them to the faith that she now knows that Nate Eaton shares with her. She is using God, Jesus Christ, and knowing his religion to try and manipulate him. And that is so evil, to try and manipulate and gaslight somebody using their faith, using their religion, their relationship with God or Jesus Christ. That is very telling in who Lori Vallow Daybell truly is and the lengths that she will go to religiously and spiritually manipulate others, especially if she knows that you share the same religious beliefs. But yet, at the very center, to the very outer edges of everything she says, there is absolutely no sensical anything and no substance.
Mine was like, this is a crazy guy. He thinks he's like Noah. Why are you so crazy? He's pushing the narrative, right? He pushed the narrative. And then the flood came. And he's the first one screaming. And he's screaming and he's running for the ark because he had been pushing this narrative the whole time, right? This fake, false narrative that this guy was crazy, that God didn't talk to him, that all these things have happened, right? That these weren't God things that happened, okay? So then he's the first one to get on there screaming. And when he's floating down the river on the flood is when his mind was changed. So when you're open to changing your mind, I would be happy to enlighten you to the things of God.
I would have an absolute field day with Lori Vallow Daybell. What makes her think that she's the divine? That she's the one that is closest to God out of 8 billion people? That she compares herself to Noah and the flood? That she is so divine that God speaks to her and that only she knows what is going to happen and only she can deliver an educated and enlightened mind, deliver you to divinity, deliver you to God, deliver you to the truth. What does that have to do with killing a half dozen people? Absolutely nothing. She's playing on his spirituality and his religion, which cuts to the very core of devout people, more so than compassion and sympathy does to empathetic people. So her angle is definitely a manipulative one. Yes, that's for sure. But am I surprised? No, because it's no different than the angles that other sociopaths and narcissists take to, of course, completely avoid any kind of real consequence, responsibility for their actions. If she was truly innocent, she would have spent the last 20 minutes declaring such. But she's guilty, and she knows she's guilty.
Well, I would love to hear what you have to say. I wish we had more than 30
I wish
minutes.
we had more time, too, because we could really get into it.
A couple of more questions for you, and then I know that you have some things you want to say. The night before Alex died, he told Zulema, I think I'm their fall guy. Was he?
No, absolutely not. And I don't think he ever said that. I watched Zulema go through probably 13, 14, 15 hours of detectives grilling her. I've watched the interviews. I've watched them all. And I watched her be berated by them, threatened by them, that they're going to arrest her, that she had a part in this, that she's a co-conspirator, and all this stuff until they got her to say exactly what they wanted her to say.
But again, that doesn't mean that what she told authorities was untrue.
And she made that up. She made up a lot of stuff. And I felt bad for her because I didn't want her arrested because she was a part of any conspiracy, because there wasn't any conspiracy. And I felt really bad for her. I do love Zulema.
Did you and Chad have anything to do with Alex's death?
No, absolutely not. We were very surprised. No.
What were you and Chad and Alex doing in the storage unit, moving the tire and the seat back and forth on the day that Brandon was shot at and the day after?
So that's so silly that is, so there was stuff in my garage that I was starting to move into the storage unit. That's what we were doing. And so I moved that stuff in there.
The tire on the Jeep?
I moved stuff that had been in there, just sitting in there. It had been sitting in there. So I didn't have enough room to park. So I couldn't carry it. It was heavy. So I had Chad help me put it in. And the next day, Alex was like, where's all that stuff in the garage? And I was like, I went and put it in the storage unit. He was like, oh, I need that. So we went and got it. And that was it.
Again, caught in a contradiction, because she says it was a bunch of old junk that had just been sitting there for a long time, like an old Jeep tire. Why would she move an old Jeep tire that's clearly unusable to a storage facility just to have her brother need that unusable Jeep tire? That makes no sense that your brother would suddenly, within 20 hours, need that old junk that had just been sitting there. But of course, when you get into the details, then you see how preposterous her stories are. In my opinion, they are sociopathic, narcissistic word salads meant to do nothing but manipulate. And that really drives me crazy when people like point the finger and they're like, look over there, look over there, look over there, look over there. It's to get you to not pay attention to what they are doing. She says a whole lot of things, but she's not saying anything of any true meaning or substance. She's also not thoroughly and truly answering the questions.
Can you see how, let's say you're not here, let's say you're at home and you find out about this story and you do all your research, you go through all the court documents, you watch the trial, and you're watching another woman going through exactly what you're going through. Can you see how it sounds kind of crazy what you're saying? Like the fact that this was all a coincidence, or you were just moving stuff in and out?
Yeah, because the narrative has trained the people.
But if you did your own research.
The narrative has trained the people. I have people come up to me all the time in the jail. I know everything about your case. I've watched everything. And they have every fact wrong.
Then why didn't she take her opportunity and her due process rights and bring out all of those inaccurate facts? Why didn't she prove that it was a conspiracy, that it was a lie, that it was a frame job, that she was not guilty? If the facts are all wrong, why didn't she use her trials to correct those facts?
In isolation? Are you able to talk with other inmates?
Yeah, you have no idea what it's like in there. Okay, I'm in max security. I'm in PC, which I didn't choose to be, but they put me in there for safety reasons.
Tell me what PC means.
So, protection.
Okay.
Yeah.
Protective custody.
Protective custody, yes.
Okay.
And so I'm in a max pod with all the other women that are max. So there's like 8 women in my pod that are facing the death penalty. Okay, we're all in rooms in there, and we are all in there 23 hours a day, and we get 1 hour out a day to take a shower and clean our rooms, and that's how it is in there. But all of our doors have openings, so we can talk to each other even through the doors, and so yeah, so I'm not isolated. But when I'm transported to court, like for my 2 trials, right, I'm with women all day long that don't normally see me. So I'm friends with everybody in my pod, but other women will shout out to me that, oh, I know everything about you. I know everything about your story. And they've been so indoctrinated by the media and their narrative that they put out. And nobody was asking me what's happening. Nobody asked Chad what's happening. Well,
now, here is how I know she is lying, because she represented herself in 2 of her trials, and she had the audacity to sit there and argue with the judge that because she is in custody, that she needed access to things a normal attorney would have access to, like the internet, witnesses, addresses, phone numbers, conference room. She was trying to get special amenities and privileges that other inmates don't normally have, including herself. She says it is maximum security and that she is locked up 23 hours a day without access to anything. So how do these other women who are on death row, how do these women have access to case files and the TV and mainstream media to then be tainted, brainwashed, and manipulated by mainstream media about Lori's case? That tells me that she is absolutely full of shit, because it can't be both ways. They either have internet access and devices to be able to see mainstream media today, or they don't at all. I highly doubt that most prisoners, including people that are on death row, are going to sit there talking to their attorney, their loved ones, and using any kind of communications they may have talking about Lori Vallow Daybell. How shallow and conceited is that? She really does think that she is divine. She thinks she is close to God.
You have listened, then you have to.
Absolutely. I wish you
need to be on the boat, Nate. Are you on the boat yet? Because when you're on the boat, Nate, I am going to be happy to share all this stuff with you, because miracles are on the way. Miracles are on the way. And when you're on the boat, that's why I sent you that last message. Well, I sent you the last message saying, when you're on the boat, you'll be ready.
So
when you're on the boat.
You say Jesus is your friend.
Absolutely.
Does he support cheating on your spouse?
We weren't cheating.
Does he support killing your husband?
I didn't kill anybody, ever.
Killing your kids?
I didn't kill anybody.
Killing your boyfriend's wife?
Okay. Was I in Hawaii when Tammy died? How did I kill her? Are you going to explain that to the world now? How did I do that?
Using your kids' money while they're dead.
Okay, all that is messed up too. How
did you rent that unit in Hawaii?
Again, the legal standard and definition of murder, homicide, first degree, is anybody over the age of 18 who knowingly causes the death of another person upon deliberation of the matter. You don't have to be the one to commit the quote act, unquote, like Gypsy Rose likes to so often say. Culpability, accountability, and responsibility lays with the person whose plan it was. You are the most culpable and responsible party.
That's all lies. Chad rented it. I didn't.
Chad didn't have any money until Tammy died.
Chad rented it with his own money.
Okay.
Chad was an author and a publisher and had his own company.
So
that's what I'm saying. You're getting
$30,000 a year.
No, but you're giving up facts that you don't. You're giving up whatever the state put up. They don't put up the whole story, Nate. They just put up tiny pieces to put together their own narrative. That's it. You don't know anything about our lives or how they were or what we were doing in the temple. What we were doing in the temple every single day.
While you were in the temple while Tammy was still alive. You were in the temple with Chad.
Several times, yes.
Right. So he's married to Tammy.
Correct. Tammy came to the temple with us too.
The 3 of you.
At some points, yes.
How many times?
Probably twice.
When is this narrative going to come out? When are you saying the full story is going to come out? Like your side, what really
happened?
So
I have written. I'm writing it. And I'm going to write out every single thing from beginning to end, so that people can really understand. Because you can't understand what happened with Tylee and JJ unless you understand what happened to Tylee in her life.
Either which way, if she was 5 or 16, you failed to protect your child. That is neglect. Whatever may or may not have happened to Tylee really is ultimately your fault, Lori. And here's what her older son has to say.
Do you guys want me to watch the interview and react and tell you my thoughts? Or do you want to skip over it? Because we got a lot going on. I'm kind of impartial at this point. 100% she would. 100% she would write a book. 100%. So yeah, just tell me if you say yes, I will react to it for you guys and talk about it. The good thing is it's not going to hurt me. I don't know what's going to be said, but my heart's prepared for this crap. So what we could do is literally sit there and watch the entire interview and the whole 40 minutes and just do what we do. We react, talk about it. I know a lot of people have their different opinions here and there. If you want my take on it, I will do that. I will do that with you guys. Okay. So I had a lot of yeses. So that's what it is. In other news, we know that that's coming up. So we are going to watch it then. You guys want to watch it? We're going to watch it as a group.
Under fair use and with my commentary, this is literally 2/3 of the entire interview. So my commentary and my reaction for entertainment and educational purposes does fall under fair use. But this is Lori's oldest child. I highly suggest you go watch.
Know Tylee's whole story from beginning to end. And when you know what happened in Tylee's life, you start to understand. The understanding, the lights click on. But nobody has said that. This lady got up in Idaho. It was 1 year after I had been arrested, and it was going to be Tylee's birthday. And there was a lady in Idaho Falls, and they were having some kind of vigil. It was on the news because I was in a pod by myself at Madison County, right? And I'm watching the news, and this lady comes on, and she says, oh, you know, it would have been Tylee's 18th birthday because she died 2 days before her 17th birthday. And then she said it would have been Tylee's 18th birthday today. And if Tylee were here, she would be out with her friends, and she would be singing and dancing, and she would be doing all these things. And this is a lady who's never met Tylee, never knew her, never knew anything about her life or our life. And I was like, do you know how many of Tylee's birthdays we spent in the hospital with her screaming in pain while she's on morphine, and the morphine isn't enough to take away the pain?
Wait. Are you really blaming this all on Tylee?
No, absolutely not. I'm saying Tylee had a really hard life, and people don't
So how does
understand.
that tie into her death and your son's death and Charles being shot and Brandon being shot at and Tammy's death?
Bingo. What does that have to do with Lori Vallow Daybell's own actions, words, choices, and behaviors that led to her planning the deaths of all of these people, of which can't really use religious and spiritual belief systems to cloak and hide behind, because she stood to significantly and physically and financially gain from these deaths. I love the fact that Nate Eaton really just brings it back full circle, because that's exactly how you stop a narcissist. That is how you stop a sociopath. In my opinion, that's the signs and symptoms that I am seeing in Lori Vallow, in her choices, actions, words, and behaviors. They are very atypical of that. And of course, if you want to see the entire interview, I highly suggest you go over to Nate Eaton on YouTube and watch the entire interview in its entirety. But there's just portions that, under fair use, I wanted to display and show and talk about, because I think it's really important when anybody is sitting down and watching anything that is on mainstream media, anything that is on YouTube, anything that is on NBC, ABC, 2020, CNN, especially anything that a content creator, a true crimer, or a journalist does. People like Lori Vallow Daybell, Sherry Papini, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, Amber Heard, even Meghan Markle, they know how to utilize content creators, true crimers, and they think they are the most gullible and the most susceptible to being manipulated. That's why they are mostly willing to sit down with people like that. But sometimes beggars can't be choosers, and they're going to do whatever interview opens up to them, even if that means Dr. Phil. Yeah, you're going to run the risk of he's going to push back and he's going to be hard. But people of this nature, people that are capable of committing very heinous felony murders, they really do operate and motion through life and move through life like they're the smartest person in the room, like they're smarter than everybody else. And when they are one-on-one with somebody, then to them, it is all fair game. They also think that they can use their beauty, their intellect, their charm, or their childlike nature and voices to put people in the position that they want them to be in. So when Nate Eaton stops her dead in her tracks and brings it back, wait a minute, you're not really trying to blame a child for her own murder, are you? And exactly how are you trying to tie that into all of the other crimes that happened? It brings it back to, you can say whatever you want, but you're not answering the question. You can say whatever you want, but you're not giving any valid answers here, any valid points. You're not showing me anything, telling me anything. And of course, it is no coincidence that Lori Vallow Daybell is going to sit there, sitting directly across from a man who she is used to manipulating men. Remember, this is a woman who has been married 5 times, who as a full-grown woman in her 30s and 40s would sit on her brother's lap and flirt with him. She inherently looks at Nate Eaton like candy, like he is just another man that is going to easily swoon and fawn over her intellect and her beauty, that he's not going to question the real substance of what she is delivering as, quote, answers, unquote. I think it's intriguing. I think it's really intriguing to watch. I think it's a great example and learning experience of how people like this really do behave and how they really do try to manipulate everybody, how they have always operated and motioned through their own lives and their relationships with other people. And it's the constant talking until you wear somebody down so much that they're just, not only are they verbally drained, they're mentally drained, they're emotionally drained. And then that really translates over physically to where they become physically bogged down by all of the bubbly, very highly energetic talking that she's doing, that they start to give up. They don't want to question her anymore, or they completely are distracted and diverted by the lack of real answers, that they don't bring it back full circle. But that has nothing to do with my question. That has nothing to do with these crimes and why they occurred in the first place. And I am so living for that, for Lori, and I love watching it, because that is her coming to the realization that she's not the smartest person in the room. She's not the most beautiful. She's not the most intellectual. And no, her manipulations aren't going to work forever. She's now 52, and she has been convicted of multiple homicides in 2 different states. Her charm has worn off a long time ago. But now she's immediately starting this interview off with, "Are you with the LDS Church?" She immediately has a sense that she won't be able to manipulate him based on her gender and her beauty. So she really dives in very hard from the very, very beginning with the spirituality and the religion. In this next clip, I really want to show you, and I think it's really important that you listen to this segment because I want to speak about this specifically. She's talking about Tylee and Tylee's biological father. Remember, at this point, that all of this started to go down. Lori was on her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. They had been married for over 10 years. And this is really crazy what she's talking about. She's talking about the custody issues with Tylee's dad.
You can't sleep because bad people wake you up in the middle of the night to do bad things to you, Mommy. And so Tylee was a nightmare. Charles thought she was a brat. I didn't discipline her. Then I was in the hospital with her, watching her scream and writhe in pain while she's on morphine because it doesn't work.
And yet, if any of that was true, if Tylee at the age of 3 was essayed by her own father, why didn't she immediately go to the law enforcement? Why didn't she go to community mental health and seek mobile crisis unit? Why didn't she immediately bring that to the attention of the judge? If Tylee was such a nightmare and made life so hard for her, her siblings, and for her husbands that were subsequent after she split from Tylee's dad, why didn't she get her daughter help? Why didn't she put her in intensive therapy? Why didn't she tell her pediatrician or child protective services on top of the judge that was presiding over her divorce case and custody case? Her attorneys, Department of Health and Human Services. Why did she neglect her daughter? Only until her daughter just became rebellious to her, became a pain in her life, an obstacle. Because people like Lori Vallow Daybell, that's how they see their children when they grow up and they are not exactly who she wants them to be. Is this the whole reason why, very coincidentally, it's the child that is problematic to her life and causing obstacles for Lori Vallow Daybell's future, that she's the one that's not going to be one of the 144,000 to survive the apocalypse, the end times, that she's going to be one of these so-called zombies. Oh yeah, that's right. Because nobody is as close to God, as divine and devout and spiritual as Lori Vallow Daybell. She's the end all be all between the unrighteous and the righteous, what's morally right and immoral. And yet the funny, ironic part of all of this is she's the convicted murderer. So who really is having the last laugh here? Because in the end, at least these people got justice. At least her children got justice. But that's the unfortunate part. Horrible, horrendous crimes like this, how can we prevent them from happening in the first place? By acknowledging the warning signs, the triggers. Her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, did bring it to the attention of authorities and even his life insurance company multiple times. But yet everybody always thinks that it's not going to be them.
The tip I got when you were in Hawaii was from none of those people.
It was before we went to Hawaii. It's before you went to Hawaii. How'd you get a tip before you showed up in Hawaii? You obviously had a tip before you showed up in Hawaii.
We found out about this case when the police sent out a news release. And then somebody random, I still to this day don't know, and I swear to you, to this day, we got a Facebook message from an anonymous account with a GPS location of where you and Chad were.
And this is even funnier because Nate Eaton goes and completely destroys what Lori Vallow Daybell thinks is his source. And she thinks it's one or two different detectives. And of course, he tells her, no, it wasn't. Yeah, there was a press release with these detectives. Yeah, I sat down and talked with them before. And yeah, these words may have been said, but it wasn't them who told me the location of where you were at that resort in Hawaii. She's actually thinking that she's entitled to get his source, despite him just telling her that it's a source and it was anonymous. Oh, and there's one little thing that I want to show you, another little tiny clip out of this entire interview. And again, I highly suggest you go over to Nate Eaton and watch it.
That's not how I picture my children. I know where they are in heaven. I know what they're doing. They have come to visit me. So I don't see them as bones. If anybody dies and you go to a cemetery and you dig them up 9 months later, you're not going to like what you find. It's not going to be
They're not
pretty.
going to look like.
Lori then goes on to say that her brother didn't tell her where he put their bodies, just that they were somewhere safe. Again, she just slipped up and proved that there was a conspiracy with her brother. In the beginning of this, she says she had no idea, that he never was meant to be the fall guy, the one that was responsible. She had no idea of any involvement. She accidentally does a Freudian slip with that one. She inadvertently does admit that her brother did have a role to play and that she knew about it, but that her brother only told her after the disposal that the kids were somewhere safe. Of course, they put them in the backyard of Chad's property because they assumed that nobody would be able to get on that private property. Again, this is Lori saying it doesn't matter what their bodies looked like in the autopsy, if they were just bones or what happened to them, because once you are gone from your body and your eternal being is up in heaven, you could care less about your physical body. You know, all this mumbo jumbo about death and eternity and heaven. Again, reaffirming that everything the mainstream media has said about her crazy religious beliefs may very well, in fact, be true. That she believed the apocalypse, the end times, truly are coming, and that she was doing the world a favor and her children a favor by taking their last moments, years, and days away from them, which again makes no logical sense. Because if you knew you had 3 years left till the end, wouldn't you want to spend that with your kids? If you liked my reaction, please subscribe, like, turn on notifications, and share.